and welcome to EST. If you love the established church, this is the place to have conversations about why the established church matters, how to better serve her, and to hear stories every week about how God is using the church for His glory and our good. This show is hosted by established church leaders for established church leaders. We're glad you're here.
Hey, what's up, and welcome to another episode of EST, the podcast for established church leaders by established church leaders. My name is Josh King.
I'm Sam Rayner, and we're here talking about important things that you need to listen to.
That's it's like,
why are you listening to this?
What do you want to call your show? Podcast. What's it going to be about? Stuff. We're important stuff. Yeah.
But before we get into it, you know who really is important?
Adam Greenway.
He is. And for those who may not get the joke, Adam, it's not really a joke at all.
It's not. He is important, and he is influential.
He no joke. Adam Greenway is the president of Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary, the place where you can get theological education, not only theological education, but it's just a great institution to teach you how to lead a church. So Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary is the place where deep theological knowledge and hands-on ministry experience come together. And at Southwestern, you will get both of those things. The faculty is dedicated to providing faithfully biblical teaching, as well as walking alongside students as they grow in ministry. If you are called to serve God's church, then Southwestern is ready to help you live your calling. So learn more at swbts.edu. And oh, by the way, look up Adam Greenway on social media and follow him, because usually he has very wise things to say. He is an influencer.
He is an influencer. Points to ponder. Those are some points to ponder.
That is his thing. And
that's I think kind of his hashtag. Yeah.
Hashtag point or points to ponder. I don't know if I forget.
Probably
if it's point to ponder. Yeah. And it's usually a pretty good thought. I mean, it's almost always. He's got some very
just the other day he retweeted me with the hashtag points to ponder, and I thought that was probably the best point to ponder.
No way. You got I didn't even notice that you got an Adam Greenway retweet.
RT, I did.
I am so jealous.
Hey, you want to hear a story about EST, our podcast? A member of our church walks up to me Sunday and he's like, hey, I listened to your podcast, and we have another podcast, my staff and I thought that's the one that he listened to. And
you have a church podcast?
Yeah, an internal podcast. I thought that, and it was new. So I thought he was, hey, I listened to the new podcast. And I said, The Lead Off? That's the name of that one. And he says, no, the other one. And I was like, EST? You listen to EST? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, it was so weird. And I was like, why? And he goes, because, I was listening to you and you're just so smooth and just laid back and chill and talking. He's like, that's not the way you preach. You preach really excited and passionate and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, it's just different. I was like, yeah, that's my smooth jazz voice. That's my podcast voice. So I have a radio voice and then I have a preaching voice. Apparently didn't know that.
I like a lot of styles of music, and I'm fairly eclectic and willing to listen to whatever. Jazz is tough. That's tough. But I like Latin jazz.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'm not eclectic at anything. I'm just not cool enough to be eclectic. I like football, American food, country music. That's just what I am. I like those things.
Huh. I'm shocked.
Have you never heard my opinion on these things? You should listen to our podcast. So what we were going to talk about is not only, music is a great transition to that because it's influential on your life, so as well as Adam Greenway. We're going to talk about our most influential. So
I wonder if Adam Greenway listens to jazz. Probably not. He's probably a country music guy.
He's an old country. I know he appreciates old country. I don't know if he what he currently he's jamming out on the I think he has a Tahoe. His Tahoe. I don't know what he's jamming out while he's driving down in his Tahoe.
I bet you he rolls down the road in his Tahoe listening to like Megadeth or something like that. Just got this picture in my mind.
Probably not.
That's completely untrue and purely speculation on my part.
Here's the tweet. Who is the most influential pastor in your ministry that you've never met? So I think we'll just start there, and then here's where we want to go with this conversation. I think we want to talk a little bit about being influenced and how that's a good thing, but without like hitching your wagon to those stars. Right now, at the time of this recording, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill is an extremely influential podcast that's happening. Very well known. I mean, I've got members we're talking about it, and other pastors are all listening to it. And it has a lot to do with Mark Driscoll, of course, and he was very influential. But we don't want to cheapen the good of the influence. But we do not also want to, when they crash and burn, if they do crash and burn, we don't want to be burned by that crash. So let's just start lighthearted and talk a little bit about who are the most influential pastors in your ministry, Sam, that maybe you've met, but you're not really close to.
Yeah, there would be two, and I don't think I've met them. I think I would remember if I had met them. But Tim Keller and Alistair Begg are the two, and then Tony Evans would be right up there as well.
Oh yeah,
so those three. And then there's kind of a second tier, not that they're second tier people, but over the years, I've kind of listened to them. I guess Chandler would have been in that kind of category for a while.
Well, let's parse
Driscoll. We're going to talk about Driscoll. I mean, he definitely would have been influential on me.
Let's parse this out a little bit. I think you could go two routes. For instance, you bring up Dr. Tony Evans. Dr. Tony Evans has got to be one of the best orators, best preachers ever. I mean, he's just phenomenal in the way that he preaches. But if I was honest, although I've listened to many of his sermons, he hasn't really influenced my ministry. I don't make church decisions, even knowing what Oak Cliff Bible or Dr. Tony Evans does. So I think that's where I'm kind of going at, is like these, because they tend to be different. We really like this preacher, but the way we do church is more influenced by this ministry or this pastor. So are you saying that all those that you just said, they influence your decisions as a pastor? Or would you put any of them in the preacher side?
Obviously not, because I guess in that case, Tony Evans would be the most influential, because I'm not Presbyterian. I'm not sprinkling your babies. So, Tim Keller's out. And then I'm not Reformed at all. So, a lot of my influences are Reformed. So they haven't even shaped my theology, even though I really respect what they have to say and listen to what they have to say. So I guess I'm a little bit of an anomaly there. The people that have shaped the way I do church, I mean, goodness, I guess it's my dad. I don't know. It would have been the churches that I grew up in. It would have been, the pastors that really nobody knows about. And just, I grew up at Springdale Church in Louisville, Kentucky, and Azalea Baptist in St. Petersburg, Florida.
I think I don't know that's, we're not saying influential, famous. They're just influential in your ministry. And, I think that there's an interesting side of that. You grew up in the same stream or family that you're currently serving in, Southern Baptist and Baptist in general. I had to find a whole new handle for how to do ministry, because I did not want to do it the way that I grew up. So like the influences of my childhood were more negative influences. Like, I'm not leading like that. Yeah. I want to find something different. So for me, obviously, and easily, is Mark Dever, the 9 Marks. I think some people would be shocked if they came around Second Baptist. They're probably going to say, "Oh, Craig Rochelle or Andy Stanley or something like that." Then that's just, y'all are talking about our t-shirts. You're not talking about the way we do ministry. You're not talking about the way we make decisions. I'm much more influenced by Mark Dever and Matt Chandler. Those two ministries and ministers, to me, the way they make decisions, the way they think through decisions, which I've been privileged enough to hear about, never been in like one of their pastoral trainings or pastoral meetings, but close enough proximity to the village. And then through all of the 9 Marks writings and things, those have been so influential to the way I make decisions as a pastor. And they helped. And so I think what we're trying to get at here is, let's say, well, let me transition this way. We have a young man that's listening to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill.
Everybody's listening to The Rise and Fall.
Well, true, but he's not a minister.
Well, and by the way, you've kind of arrived as a podcaster if all the other podcasters are talking about your podcast while you're podcasting. So we're a podcast talking about another podcast right now.
Yeah. And I don't know if arrive is the correct term or slammed into us like a Mack truck. The Rise and Falls of Mars Hill is crazy. It's almost serial level. You know, the serial podcast that changed true crime and that sort. It's almost that big.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like you popped in a VHS and you're watching an old soap opera. It kind of throws you back to all the drama of a previous era. I think that's part of the.
Sure.
There's a bit of, at this point, there's a bit of nostalgia because we're talking, some of this stuff.
2000.
Yeah. I mean, you're 20 years, you're a generation removed from the beginning of this stuff.
Yeah. Well,
so I think the throwback's a very real thing for people, even though Driscoll's still around.
Sure. I have found recently that my generation or my age, we really just get into these things. Like I was watching a documentary on the Unabomber, talking more about 9/11, documentaries on 9/11, those sort of things, because I saw bits and pieces of this. Like when you're listening to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, Mike Cosper, Christianity Today, we want to, of course, always credit our sources. I know who we're talking about here. Christianity Today. I knew these things. I knew these people. I read that book, yes. And on the latest episode, they were talking about John Piper at Passion. I remember this. I know these things were happening. And what these documentaries or these podcasts do is they go back and they like draw the lines, connect all the things, make you go, oh, I had no idea that that whole screaming, who do you think you are thing was staged. I thought it was passionate and real. I had no idea it was repeated 9 times the exact same way, on 9 different services. So
five. I think 5? If I remember the podcast right,
it was 9.
I think, regardless,
let's say it's more than
the
one.
point remains.
So I didn't know that. And so you start to piece these things together and you start to say, oh, okay, well, that's when that, whatever. So I think that's why these things are so fascinating to me. And when we're watching this or listening to this, there's burnout. And I was talking to that young man who's listening to the show, who's not a minister. And I was trying to help him understand that I graduated high school in 2000. My first full-time ministry position was in 2001. And at that time, Darren Patrick, Daniel Montgomery, Mark Driscoll, Matt Chandler, these guys were some of the most influential people in my sphere, in my purview. I mean, they were giants. And then, of course, you had people like John MacArthur and John Piper who are still very influential. But even like there's young ministers who are just like, yeah, I've heard of John Piper because he's retired now and he's not as active, those sort of things. Daniel Montgomery is no longer influential. Darren Patrick has tragically gone on. Mark Driscoll, of course, has fallen. At least that's what the podcast presumes. The rise and fall.
According to the rise and fall of Mars Hill, yes.
And many other people. Matt Chandler has remained faithful and true from everything that I know. So I was trying to tell him, like, when you think back on this, Perry Noble was a massive influence at that time. These people, most of them, just being honest, Rob Bell was a massive influence on, when you were student ministry, when I was starting off, everybody was listening to Numa. Everybody was watching Numa videos,
Yeah, and understand, it's easy to critique things looking back. Francis Chan. Uh-huh. Yeah, there's several names here, and it's easy to critique them looking back 15, 20 years.
And that's not what we're doing right now.
No, not at all. We're just saying these were influences in our lives. Every name that you brought up to some degree was influential. You could probably add in David Platt as well.
Absolutely.
During this kind of era, he came a little later, but it's a very simple explanation as to why. One, they were extraordinarily gifted, but 2, they harnessed the power of the internet. And you're talking, streaming was just beginning to become a thing. And so now you didn't have to order the tapes or the CDs. You could just get on the website and listen.
You know what's funny?
you didn't do the video wasn't even around. I mean, it was all audio at this point. And like you, I graduated in 98. I took a bivocational position in a rural church in 2004. And by bivocational, it was 6 people and I made $50 a week. And we didn't have air conditioning in the building. So I was listening to these guys, but my world was so different than their world that the influences weren't quite all there the way that it might have been with some others, at least on
Erwin McManus. I could just these names just keep popping in my head about like guys that I just thought, I wouldn't say I thought they hung the moon, but I really did want to read everything that they published. And I wanted to kind of know and glean from it. And of course, man, I did not go down the path of Rob Bell and Erwin and some of those kind of.
I wouldn't put them in. I wouldn't put those two guys in the same category, by the way.
I wouldn't put them in the same category, but they're swimming in the same pool. And I didn't get in that pool.
They both look cool, right?
Yeah. And there's more to it than that. But I think that what we're trying to talk about here today is how do we grapple as ministers now? And obviously, if you're listening to this, you are currently still a minister, a pastor, and you were more than likely influenced by these people, or you were influenced by people who were heavily influenced by these people. And so how do we grapple with that now? Is there an embarrassment to it? And how do we, I guess my other question is, should we abandon this stuff now? Should I just look at all the list of the people that I would maybe make right now that are super influential and say, I'm no longer going to be influenced by people?
No, I think that would be unbiblical. I would go so far as to say, I'm not going to be influenced by the
greater church,
people who are leading in the church, and I'm going to be completely on my own.
Yeah,
is a very dangerous road to go down. So choose your influences wisely. That's what I would say.
I'll say this too.
Don't get so caught up on, this person is the way. This person is the model. This person has figured it out, because every generation has thought that. And then lo and behold, another generation comes along and guess what? Things change.
Here's the deal though. You said it was the internet, podcast, vodcast, those sort of things, which is interesting because I know you. You're only through episode 5 of the Rise and Fall of Mark Hill. Episode 6 launched this week. Episode 6 is all about the internet, is how Mark got. So
okay.
That's just how smart you are. You're just saying how.
No, I haven't. I haven't. At the time of this recording, I've only listened through halfway of episode 5, I think it is. Yeah. So I didn't even know that
about the internet's.
Really? Yeah. Okay, that's
the brand. And it's interesting. What I think is it's both of those answers. So yes, I do think that Chandler and Driscoll and these guys all became super influential because of podcasting and internet. Also, I think we're more hard pressed right now to find those sort of influencers currently living right now that are influencing. I don't think we have them anymore. You know why? Because of the internet. As that thing matured, it became much more regional and it became much more cliquish. And so you have these smaller level influencers that have a greater amount of influence on a smaller amount of people. Maybe instead of 1 million downloads or whatever it is, 2 million downloads, you'll have, instead of, what I'm trying to say is, instead of 4 or 5 preachers having 2 million downloads per sermons, you'll have several thousand pastors having a couple thousand downloads, but those are very influential, very cliquish. You know what I mean? Because it's dispersed it out very much more.
I think it is more regionalized now than at the national level or global level. I think that there are more people figuring out how to utilize these tools. And I believe all of that is a good thing. I mean, for me, when I got started in ministry, I was in rural Kentucky. I did not need to be mimicking Mark Driscoll where he was in Seattle. That's foolishness. In the same way, I can't mimic Matt Chandler in suburban Dallas for my ministry here in a coastal / kind of urban Florida. I mean, it just doesn't work. So I think the regionalization of influences is probably better. Although if somebody's really good at preaching, like I'd look at an Alistair Begg in that way, and I'm just like, the dude is just solid. I don't steal his sermons because I can't talk like him, but
Right.
But at the same time, you can go back and listen to his stuff from the 80s or 90s, and it's still good. Like it's just great exposition of scripture.
Yeah.
So I think that there are still some out there that are worth following. I really look to those who have been proven in ministry over several decades. And if I'm going to really attach myself to somebody, those are the ones that I tend to gravitate towards. The newer guys that are coming up, that are blowing it up, and all of a sudden their church goes from 0 to 5,000 overnight. Although because of COVID, we're seeing certainly less of that. I mean, good. Go learn from them.
0 to 250 overnight.
Yeah, it's kind of
in the post-COVID era.
Well, and that's where you're going to see more neighborhood churches. You're going to see a move back away from the mega church. And as we move, and not that the mega church is going away, but as that movement wanes, and you can look at the stats, you can look at the numbers, the movement is waning. It's a fact. It's just a fact. And maybe you could point to 1 or 2 mega churches out there that are blowing it up. Sure, I'm sure that's the case. But as a movement, it's waning. And as that happens, those particular podcasts and sermon series and all of that, they're just going to become less influential on a large scale. Part of the draw of Driscoll and others, Chandler, was this massive multi-site movement and big churches and, video venue and, all this stuff that was new at the time, which now is, anybody can do it. Not everyone does it well, but anyone can do it. It's just not as, it's not the new thing anymore.
Yeah, it's not catchy. It's not cool. So I think as I'm trying to think through navigating this, what do you think about this philosophy? I am comfortable. I really am just comfortable with being influenced, allowing myself to be influenced by different people from different walks of life and different streams of theology. And it just doesn't bother me, because when I talk about being influenced, what I'm talking about is trying to glean what I can use and, spit out the rest. And I think that that's a discipline we used to value. And now we just have this wholesale, I have to completely subscribe to everything he or she does or teaches. And we are so willing to throw people out. Let me give you an example. I truly do believe one of the most clear thinkers on leadership is Craig Rochelle. I love what he does. I love a lot of the ways that they brand themselves. So I think as far as leadership and communication, I value Life Church and Craig Rochelle. To be honest with you, I can't even really tell you what their theology is. It's not my concern. I'm not looking over to Craig Rochelle to say, help me walk through, what Paul is teaching in this passage here. I'm not looking to him to do that, but I like a lot of his stuff. I like the way he thinks, and it challenges me to think more clearly and to communicate more clearly. I feel very similar about Andy Stanley. And I just think that what we've done recently, and again, we can all roads lead back to Trump, but if we wanted to kind of like dictate that out.
Wait. We went from Craig Rochelle, which I agree with everything you just said. There's a lot to learn from. I don't know that I would use I know I would not use his model of ministry. And then you just said all roads lead back to Trump. I just want to point this out before you go there.
Currently, philosophically, we have to at least acknowledge Trump in all of our current culture. So what I'm saying is, I'm not a Craig Rochelle disciple. I'm a Craig Rochelle appreciator, and I think you should appreciate him and their ministry. And I'll give you another example. I was interviewing at a very large church, ironically, in Edmond, Oklahoma, which would be literally the next exit down from Life Church. And they asked me, who are some of the influencers in your ministry? My answer, the same I'm answering right now, is Mark Dever, among other people. When they later told me that I was not their candidate any longer, that was the reason why. They were like, we are just not comfortable with somebody so influenced by Mark Dever. And I said, What do you mean so influenced? You asked me one question. I said Mark Dever, and we never talked about him again. We never talked about 9 marks. We never even broke apart the 9 marks. But I think that there's some of that.
Well, he's anathema in certain circles. That's why.
He is. And so they were like, that was just too much. And I was like, well, I think that's, I'll be honest with you. And I know that those elders are not listening to this podcast because we're so heavily influenced by Mark Dever.
They quickly cast you out for never to look at you ever again.
I would say this. That's immature. That's an immature understanding of leadership. It's an immature understanding of theology. It's immature understanding of just human relationships, that we can be influenced by people and not do everything. I pastor a church that in 2 weeks will have 2 campuses, and on the 2 campuses have 5 services. Mark Dever and I do not agree on things. I mean, just like obvious things. But I truly, deeply respect
just
the way
for
he
our
thinks about
listeners
things.
who don't know, Mark Dever is completely opposed to the multi-site model.
And the multi-service model.
And except on certain services where it's okay for him to do it. But
well, hey, it does not matter what he does. He has a very well thought through reason for doing it. And I respect that about him. And so
if you want to learn, listen to Dever, certainly. Absolutely.
Hey, I'll tell you something. Hey, how about this? Let me ask you this. Who is somebody that seems to be so influential on other people that you're just not into? Let's go ahead and share that.
Oh, goodness. Okay. You go first because you brought the question. I got to think. I'll give you an answer. I just got to think about it.
Here it is. You ready?
Yeah.
Tim Keller.
Oh. Well, I can see that. I like Tim Keller.
Micah loves Tim Keller. You love Tim Keller. I cannot tell you how many times my wife and I are talking about something. She goes, "Oh, you should read Tim Keller on that topic." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's all right." I mean, give me the summary because I don't want to read all those words. I'll tell you another one.
Oh, I've got to go. I've got to say mine.
Okay. I'll say mine after this.
Stephen Furtick.
People influenced by him. People that are like, "Oh, I love that guy."
Oh, come on.
No, serious theological ministers. People that are like,
yes.
I don't know any serious ministers that are like, "Oh, I love that guy."
Oh, there's all sorts of Furtick fanboys out there.
Well, that's a Florida thing then. It's not. I don't know anybody. Here's another one.
And I don't, by the way, I don't know him personally. You just asked the question, and this is a podcast, and it's meant for, to some degree, entertainment value. So I don't want to come across as like knocking somebody or being so overly negative. You just asked the question.
Timothy, Dr. Keller.
I don't get Stephen Furtick at all. In fact, every time I listen to the song Rattle, and he's in it, I'm just like, seriously, man, like the song would be so much better if you just weren't in it. Just
wait, he's in it?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What's he doing?
I think the live version. He I don't know. Anyway, I'm always just like, man, you don't need to be a worship pastor. Let your worship pastor be the worship pastor. You don't need to be in the song.
Hey, that's just a general good word. Anyways, I'll tell you another one. Paul David Tripp. I just literally if his book is 200 pages long, it could be 50 pages if he would not repeat himself so much.
Oh, completely agree.
That's my bottom line. And I can't do that. I can't do that in personal conversation. I can't read that. Now, when you boil it down, when you skim through all the repetitive, and I'm not talking 3 or 4 I'm talking 4 or 5 pages of repeating himself. When you boil that down to the nuggets of what he's saying, it's genius. It's so applicable and good. I'm just not going to read that. So there you have it. You can cancel us now. You can unsubscribe because I don't think Timothy Keller and Paul David Tripp are all that great. I do think they're great. It's just not my cup of tea.
And we've really annoyed everyone with this last segment. Or either you're cheering like, yes, or you're like, no.
Finally, somebody said it. Well, it's podcasting. And I know people that are like, I don't like Chandler's preaching. He's yelling all the time. I know that.
The thing about Chandler, I can't get over Chandler. Like his introductions, at least I've stopped listening to him probably several years ago at this point. But his introductions were always like 30 minutes long.
Well, you gotta connect. I don't know what to say.
I'm listening to it. I'm like, where's this going? And then finally you get to the message and like 30 minutes later and you're like, okay, that's good. That's really good.
Another funny thing is as of, a couple of months ago, everybody was dogging on J.D. Greer. And I'll be really honest with you. I've always very much respected J.D. Greer's ministry and what he does, but I didn't listen to him preach very much. I'd see him everywhere, at everything I'd go to. He was one of the preachers, and that was great. But I didn't really listen to his preaching until everybody started dogging on him, and they would post clips of him and stuff. And then I was like, I think I really like this. And I have listened to more J.D. Greear sermons since that little group started dogging on him than before. So I'd add him to the list of modern current influencers on my ministry.
I'd agree. And if you're looking for somebody who I believe has a lot of integrity, I mean, anyone could fall at any time for any reason, of course. Sure. But so even somebody like J.D. Greear, you have to be careful about, falling at their feet and worshiping them. But I see a lot of integrity there, and I see a lot of sound biblical preaching. I don't listen to him a whole lot, but I've listened to several sermons. Enough to know this guy's good. So I would point you that direction.
If we were going to try to boil this down to somebody's like, why did I just listen to that? I would say this: listen. Be influenced on multiple levels in multiple ways. Also allow other people to be influenced in multiple. If somebody came up to me and said, hey, here's a nugget that I got from Stephen, let's say Stephen Furtick. If they came up to me and said, did you hear what Stephen Furtick and them are doing at Elevation? I thought it was really well thought through. Don't sit there and brand them as a heretic and run them out of town. There is very likely a lot of things that Elevation has really thought through and could be applicable to your church or your ministry. But at the same time, you just want to kind of glean from what you can glean.
Yeah, multiple influences, multiple streams of thought, broad spectrum of theology. These are all lessons that I think are important for everyone. I'm actually reading more source documents around critical race theory than I am anything else.
Wow.
Even though I don't agree with critical race theory. It's kind of like when I was in seminary, at Southern Seminary in the mid 2000s, and everyone was like, Calvinism. It's the greatest thing ever. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you think about Calvin's Institutes? Well, I haven't read it, but Calvinism. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna go read Calvin's Institutes. So, and actually it was kind of boring, honestly, but he's good on prayer. He's very good on prayer.
Yeah. No doubt.
But then with this CRT stuff, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go read the actual original authors and what they have to say. I don't necessarily agree with them, but I'm reading it just so I can know. And it's amazing. It is amazing. You can tell those who are barking about it on either side and haven't read what it actually is. And it's entirely annoying.
They read the Twitters, dude. So that's good enough.
Let me tell you, if you read Twitter, you will be so well informed and just be influenced by everything.
There are doctrines of Twitter.
Be influenced by @EST Church.
That's what you should do. You should rate, review, and subscribe. I really don't know how long we've gone. Is that good? Did we go good?
we're actually right on time. So it is time to close this thing down. You can send all of your hate mail to @JoeWiki, where
read it.
Because I'm just here trying to be nice to everybody, but he wanted to talk about everyone's dirty laundry. So
I'm sorry, I offended you. You can build a bridge. I had a coworker that used to say, you can get glad in the same britches you got sad in. So there you go. You can get over it is essentially what she meant by that. So thanks for listening to EST. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll catch you next week.
You've been listening to EST, a discussion for the established church. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, as well as subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.